Hey y'all, this is Conversations with a Therapist podcast. I am Jennifer Kyalo, I am a psychologist, and I am your host. Today I want to talk to you about something called therapeutic narcissism. I am bringing this up because I think it is too common, too rampant, and it is done without our knowledge most of the times. It's not because therapists are bad people that they become therapeutically narcissistic, but sometimes you just get carried away by the work, you get carried away by the knowledge that you have about therapy and about your clients, etc., etc. And with time, you become very narcissistic about the position you hold in your clients' lives. So this episode is going to be most useful and most engaging to people who work as mental health professionals. If you're a therapist, this is going to be for you. But if you are not a mental health professional and you want to stick around so that you understand some of the concepts that we think about in the therapy world, then I invite you to do so because you are going to get a lot of benefits. And you will probably start seeing therapeutic narcissism when you are interacting with psychologists, when you are in the presence of a mental health professional. And you're not necessarily going to be using this information to point out their narcissism, but just like calling them out and being like, you're being a narcissist. That's not the agenda that we have with this information. The point of learning this information is so that you can have these conversations more openly and in a more informed way. And yeah, if that is something that you're curious about, please hang around and let's talk about therapeutic narcissism. This episode is going to be divided into two parts. Part one is going to be just a definition of what therapeutic narcissism is. And part two is going to be talking about the 12 ways that you can tell that as a therapist, you are being narcissistic, or basically the measures that you can use to identify therapeutic narcissism within yourself. So what exactly is therapeutic narcissism? Therapeutic narcissism is when, as a therapist, you start thinking or believing that you are the most important person in your client's life. It could be because maybe your client is going through a lot of things and they come to you when they are at their most lowest level, they are very desperate, they are struggling, they are going through very many difficult things. So once you start seeing yourself helping them, you kind of develop this belief that you're a very important figure in their life. You start to believe that you are one of the most important fixtures in their life and they can't do without you. And you notice this is very common, especially when clients are isolated. When they don't have family or friends or people they can rely on, the therapist becomes like their central person. The therapist becomes the client's only source of social support, which should not be happening ideally because you are not in your client's life like that. You only see your client once a week. That's like 1 hour out of 168 hours. The rest of those hours are occupied by other people or other experiences. So you as a therapist are not necessarily the most important person in your client's life. Yes, you are important and the work that you do is important, but you're not necessarily the most important person in the client's life. And if as a therapist you use this position that you hold in the client's life and you start seeing yourself as the central figure in their life, then it can be very, very isolating to the client and eventually hurt the client in very many damaging ways. So therapists who believe that they are the most powerful, the most important person in the client's life, they want to be present for the client's every single experience. They want to be the person that the client relies on, the person that the client calls when there's an emergency. Those are issues that can lead to dependence, and dependence is not a goal of therapy. It's not even supposed to be anywhere close to therapy. Your clients are not supposed to be dependent on you as a therapist. They're supposed to be dependent on their social circle, and you are a support system to a degree, just not the main support system. So I hope that it's very clear that when a therapist becomes too obsessed with their position in their life, then they can become narcissistic about it. They start thinking that they're very, very important, and they might even get offended when the client does not consult them on different aspects of their life. So now that we understand therapeutic narcissism is believing that you are the most important person in your client's life, let's talk about the 12 ways that therapeutic narcissism can manifest in the therapeutic relationship. Number one, as a therapist, you start thinking that you are smarter than you really are. So when you are with a client, you start thinking and believing that it is your role to give the client answers to every single thing that they are talking about. When they have a question, you want to be the one that gives them that answer because they can't find it anywhere else. You're the only one who has this information. You start to believe that you know a lot when you really don't. So when a client has, let's say, an issue that is outside of your expertise, you try to make sure that you can find those answers because you think that you're the only person who can offer this client support. When you start thinking that you are smarter than you are, just so that you can make the client feel, supported, the client feel that they have someone and that someone is you, that can become very, very problematic. And that actually is the number one symptom that you are being narcissistic as a therapist in that relationship. So thinking that you're smarter than you are, big, big problem. Number two, when you start to think that you are more skilled than you really are. One of the things that you come to identify when you get into this profession is that there's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of things to learn. There are a lot of therapy theories that exist, therapeutic modalities that exist. There are so many. You can never learn everything. And that means at every given time, you are still a student. No matter how many years ago you graduated, you are a continuous student. You're always learning. You're always trying to upskill. The moment you become too confident that you have become completely skilled, that you're the smartest person in the room, that you have everything it takes to be the best therapist in the world, that is when your downfall starts actually to happen, because none of us is as smart as we think we are. And the moment you find yourself becoming too confident in your skills, that's when you should be questioning your skills even the most. We are not as skilled as we think we are. It's okay for us to admit that there are a lot of gaps in our knowledge. That does not mean that we don't offer good therapy to our clients. That means that even as we are offering the therapy that we offer, we are also aware that there are gaps that can be filled by other people. There are gaps that can be filled by other professionals, and that does not make us less. Basically, what I'm saying is we should not be tying our self-esteem and our self-worth to the skills we have accumulated. You as an individual should be having enough self-esteem to ground yourself to be able to do the work that you need to do without grounding it in the skills that you have accumulated. Like, you have worth even beyond the skills that you have. You have worth beyond being a therapist. There is more to you than being a therapist. And the moment you identify that and you understand it, it becomes easier to get comfortable with what you know and what you don't know. That calls for a serious amount of intellectual humility. You cannot take this stance of knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know and being comfortable with where you are as a continuing student of life without having a huge amount of intellectual humility. You don't have to know everything. The moment you think that you need to know everything and then you start believing that you know everything, then that is how therapeutic narcissism enters the therapy relationship. Number three, when you think that charisma is an adequate substitute for skill. So what this means is, when as a therapist you start thinking that having this big personality, this person who can be charming and you can make your clients feel nice and you are funny or you are very relatable, you start thinking that that kind of a personality is sufficient to do the work that is needed in therapy. And now you don't have to learn all the skills. You don't have to learn all the theory. You just have to show up as this amazing, interesting person, the person who can wow their clients. That can be one of the biggest causes of therapeutic narcissism, because then you stop building your skill set. You start focusing on how do I become more interesting, thinking that charisma and a big personality is sufficient for the work. In reality, it's not. Yes, as therapists, we are the tools of the work. Yes, as therapists, we bring our personalities into the therapy room, but that is not enough for us to do the work that we need to do. It is not a substitute for the skills that you need to acquire for you to become a good therapist. A good therapist has, yes, the personality, not necessarily a big one, but enough personality to engage with another person. But also, a good therapist is very skilled. A good therapist is smart enough. A good therapist has enough knowledge of the theory, enough experience of the work. A good therapist is curious, has a lot of other characteristics beyond personality. So the moment you start thinking that charisma and a big personality is an adequate substitute for the skill, then therapeutic narcissism develops. You stop developing yourself. You start developing the personality. You start thinking that therapy is a performance. Yet in reality, therapy requires you to be present and to be real, to be authentic, to be genuine, etc., etc. So that is the third way that therapeutic narcissism can show up in the therapy relationship. A fourth way, remember these are 12 ways. So we are at number 4. A fourth way that therapeutic narcissism can show up in the therapy room is when you think that a strong theoretical grounding is unnecessary, that you don't have to learn any theory, that you can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that is sufficient. So there's this thing that I hear a lot and I know is quite popular and quite common, and it's the integrative or eclectic therapist. I am not saying there's something wrong with that. The problem with that is that many unskilled therapists believe that being an eclectic therapist is just picking any technique, any skill, and applying it to the problem that the client has. So you're picking from different theoretical backgrounds. You're picking a few things here and there from different theoretical backgrounds, then sticking them together and throwing them at the client to see which one will stick, which one will help the client get better or achieve their goals. That is not a theoretical grounding. That is just you trying things and being experimental. And that is not you being eclectic. In reality, being an eclectic therapist means that you have a very good understanding of many, many theories. You have a good understanding of many, many techniques in psychology. So when you are in a session with a client, you take theories that you already know and deeply understand, then apply them to the client in front of you. That is what it means to be eclectic or to be integrative as a therapist. But trying out things, attempting things because you had them somewhere. One day you heard about DBT skills and you went and collected a few of them, and now you're bringing them to therapy and being like, oh, I can try this thing, or I can try this other thing. I can try a breathing technique, or I can try a mindfulness exercise. But you don't know what those things mean, and you don't know what they are grounded in. You don't know what the purpose is. You're not even well grounded in DBT. You're not well grounded in CBT, but you know a few things here and there because you have been on TikTok long enough, or you've been on Instagram long enough, and you've seen the carousels that have techniques posted there. That is not being an eclectic therapist. So when you start assuming that you don't need to have a strong theoretical grounding, you start believing that you can just try a few things here and there. You can attempt with this technique or that technique, and if you shikanisha them, something will come out of it. Eventually the client will get better. Eventually we will find something that works. Then that is a problem. As I've said, if you want to be an eclectic therapist, there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that you must know about being an eclectic therapist is that you must know a lot of things about a lot of things when it comes to psychology. There's a requirement that you know a lot of theory. There's a requirement that you know a lot of techniques from the different theoretical backgrounds, and then you know how to borrow from each one of them to create a unique experience for the client, a customized therapeutic experience for the client. That is what it means to have a theoretical grounding. The other option is for you as an individual, as a therapist, to find a way to be grounded in maybe one or two particular theories that you know very, very well, and then you can borrow from others when you need to. So for example, as a therapist, me as Jennifer, I am very well grounded and very well rooted in existential therapy. I am also very well grounded and very well rooted in humanistic therapy. I understand a lot about psychodynamic theory, and so I use those theoretical groundings to help me do the work that I do with clients. That does not mean that I don't borrow from other theories that I know a little bit about. So for example, I have taken some time to learn about CBT. I have learned the basics of DBT. I have learned the basics of ACT, etc., etc. So when I borrow techniques from those different theoretical perspectives, I borrow them knowing what exactly they're supposed to be doing as they complement the theory that I am already well grounded in, which is existential therapy, psychodynamic therapy, humanistic therapy, etc., etc. So I hope you can see the main difference between having a strong theoretical grounding so that you know what to borrow from which therapeutic technique, and just jumping around like a tadpole trying to find a technique from here and a technique from there to shikanisha and form a kind of collage to help the client. I hope that is quite clear. The point of this particular therapeutic narcissism item is a strong theoretical grounding is very, very necessary. You have to learn theory. You have to learn a lot of it. You have to know what to borrow from other theoretical backgrounds if you want to. You don't have to, but you have to learn how to borrow them so that you know how to become an eclectic therapist if that is the goal you have in mind. But don't just jump around from one thing to another. If you become that kind of therapist, the one who's jumping from one theory to another, picking and choosing a few random things here and there because the client is in front of you and you are anxious about doing something, then that can create a serious issue with therapeutic narcissism. All right, number 5. Therapeutic narcissism can show up when you think that interpretations to the patient must be totally accepted by the patient, or you label the client as resistant if they don't accept your interpretation. One of the things that we do in therapy is that when a client brings up something or we talk about a particular topic or a particular event that happened in the client's life, sometimes we'll sit there and theorize about what that could mean. And as a therapist, you can get carried away by the interpretation that you have about what it means for the client. You can get carried away thinking that now you have completely understood the client's problem, and now the interpretation that you have is the right one, and it is okay, and the client now must accept that interpretation because you've worked really hard at identifying whatever you think you have identified. The thing is, sometimes our interpretations are not necessarily reflective of what the client is really experiencing. Sometimes the client has a different perspective. Sometimes the client has a different way of seeing things, and you have to be open to hearing the client's perspective and collaborating in the interpretation. So the interpretation doesn't become you telling the client, this is what things are. The interpretation becomes, what do you think this means for you personally as a client? And when you interpret something and the client does not agree with it, or they don't see it that way, it doesn't apply to them, then you should not start labeling the client as resistant. And it's very easy to start labeling clients as resistant. So when you start labeling clients as resistant because they have not agreed with the interpretation, then you're basically seated there being therapeutically narcissistic. Don't label your clients as resistant just because they are not agreeing with you. They are full individuals who are allowed to have their own opinions. If you expect people to agree with you all the time, if you expect your clients to agree with everything that you tell them all the time, then you are not doing therapy. You're doing something. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I would call it, but you're not doing therapy. Just to know that. And it's okay for you to call whatever you're doing, whatever it really is, but don't label it as therapy because it's not. Therapy is a collaborative experience. Therapy is a collaborative relationship. You have a conversation with your client. You don't tell them. They are not there to be lectured. They are there to create a relationship with you that is built on mutual respect, that is built on collaboration and working together to get to where the client wants to go, to advance their goals. Don't become narcissistic about your interpretations. Until now, when the client says, hey, that's not my reality, that doesn't mean the same thing that you're saying for me. Now you become angry and you start saying, oh, this client is resistant, etc., etc. And by the way, there's a whole school of thought that believes that there is nothing like a resistant client. There's just bad therapists. I don't want to get into that because I know that can become a whole topic. If you want me to get into it some other time, please let me know and I will. I'm always happy to talk controversy. Anyway, let's move on to point number 6. You can become therapeutically narcissistic when you believe that the theoretical model you practice should not and cannot ever be challenged. That is the epitome, that is at the core of therapeutic narcissism. Believing that the theory that you practice, the one that we've just spoken about, you've gotten a theoretical grounding, and now you start believing that that theory cannot be questioned, it cannot be challenged, people cannot be skeptical about it. You start believing that it is the one and the only one, and if people challenge it, then there's a problem with them. If your theoretical model, the one that you practice, the one that you're grounded in, becomes a cult to you, then we have a problem. Because you have to understand we have very many theories out there in the world. Psychology has a lot of psychological theories. All of them have been developed by different people and they have been helpful to different people at different times. There are people who have benefited from CBT. There are people who have benefited from psychodynamic therapy. There are people who have benefited from Gestalt therapy, etc., etc. And just because you believe in CBT does not mean that CBT can never be challenged because it has its own flaws. It doesn't work for everyone all the time, for every situation. And it's okay for it to be challenged. If it cannot be challenged, then you're saying that it's a kind of God of some sort. And now it cannot be questioned. I mean, God is questioned all the time, right? So when the moment you start becoming too defensive and too protective of the theoretical model that you practice, then you are suffering from a serious case of therapeutic narcissism. So get that checked. Get that checked. Number 7, when you start believing that the model that you practice, that theoretical model you've just spoken about, when you start believing that that model must be applicable to all patients without question or modification, that is a serious case of therapeutic narcissism. Let me explain. Let's say you practice CBT, and I'm using CBT because it's popular. Almost everyone knows what CBT is out there in the world. If they don't, it's very easy to find on Google. When you start believing that CBT is applicable to all patients and it should not be modified or questioned or altered or customized to fit a specific patient's issue, then that is, again, another serious case of therapeutic narcissism. You are believing that the therapeutic model that you practice is the one. It's the only one. And it is the ultimate therapeutic model. That is not based on any science. There is no ultimate therapeutic model. If anything, you should go and read more on therapeutic common factors. Common factors has been a bigger determinant of success in therapy than any specific model that you practice. Common factors is a whole topic that I can talk about if you want me to. I love common factors. I have used common factors in almost every therapy session I've ever had since I learned what common factors are. And so, don't believe that the model that you practice is the ultimate model. It's not. I promise you it's not. And if you think it is, again, you are suffering from therapeutic narcissism. In reality, every model works for different people at different times for different problems. And the model that you practice can be edited and modified so that it can fit a different client if needed. If your model has only must be practiced the way it has been written, it's like the Bible and there's no room for editing, then we have a problem. And don't fall for that. Don't fall for that. I promise you, as I said, none of these things are cast in stone. They are always evolving. They are always changing. They are always becoming something different. They are being reviewed constantly. And that is the scientific process. We are here to refine things. We are not here to get committed to what you already know. That's why you must become a student of life. That's why you have to become a continuous learner. There is no room for you to get comfortable because you've learned one theory or you've learned one model. Open yourself up to learn other models. And when you are using the model that you are a religious user of, remember that that model needs to be edited and customized to fit a different client when they need it. And if it's not working for a particular client, that is okay. It's not because the client is a bad person or because they are resistant or whatever other label that you want to place on them. It is okay for you to be like, yeah, this model just doesn't work for this client or doesn't work for the problem that the client has. That does not make the model a bad model. Don't be too committed to the models that you believe in. It's okay for you to hold them loosely. Even as much as you know about them, it's okay for you to hold those beliefs very loosely so that you are open to other ideas. I've belabored that point. Let me move on to point number 8. Therapeutic narcissism can show up when you believe that empirical support for the work that you do is unnecessary and should be resisted. This is coming from the thing about evidence-based therapy. Evidence-based therapy has become a whole topic. It's everywhere. Everyone is talking about it in the therapeutic circles. There are people who are very much against evidence-based therapy. There are people who are very committed to evidence-based therapy and they don't believe in any other thing. But we keep forgetting that this evidence is not cast in stone. Again, I am saying that these therapies are always evolving. If whatever you practice, then people talk about the theory that you practice. And one of the things they say is this theory needs to be reviewed. It needs to be measured. It needs to be researched further so that we can have empirical support for it. We can have data to show that it works or it doesn't work, etc., etc. And the first instinct that you get is to resist that measuring or to resist that research being done on that particular model that you practice. Then that again is a case of therapeutic narcissism. If you are confident enough about a theory that you practice, you should not be afraid of it being tested. And if you are afraid of it being tested, then you should be asking yourself why. I have said this before and I will say it again. Don't become too committed to the theory that you practice just because it feels comfortable to you. It's okay for these things to be questioned. Otherwise, why are we practicing them if they can't be questioned and they can't be edited and be improved over time? I want to believe that we want to be working with the best models out there. So if we need to be working with the best models out there, it means that what we are working with needs to be constantly reviewed, needs to be edited, needs to be researched further. We need to get more and more evidence for the work that we do so that the work that we do is grounded in research. Why are we resistant to our work being scrutinized? Why are we afraid of data being collected on the work that we do? As you've said, every theory has its merits. And if yours cannot be tested, if yours cannot be researched upon, if the one that you believe in cannot be researched upon, then we should be questioning you. There are too many theories out there in the world. Right now, there are too many. There's always a new model coming out. I have seen so many new acronyms. I cannot even keep up with them. I don't know about you, but it can get overwhelming. And what we need is research into what works. What we need is research into these theories that we are purporting to be working. And if the therapy that you practice, the model that you practice, cannot be researched upon because you're afraid of some, I don't know what you're afraid of, then we have a problem. That is therapeutic narcissism. You think that yours is superior and it is safe and it is protected, it is special. It should not be questioned. Why? Why do you think so? Who told you that it is the ultimate theory? It's not. Anyway, I don't have beef with the theory you practice. You're allowed to practice what you... No, you're not allowed to practice what you want. You are allowed to practice what is grounded in research. So do not become committed too much and become an ambassador of your theory as if you're getting paid for it. You're getting paid to do good work, and good work requires a grounding in some research of some sort. And the better the research, the better the grounding for your work. So allow yourself to be scrutinized. Don't be afraid of being scrutinized. And it's not you they are scrutinizing anyway. When we are researching these theories, it's not you personally. It's not a personal attack. We are researching the theory so that we can improve it, so that we can share it to many more people, so that it can become widely used. There's a reason why psychoanalysis is big. There's a reason why psychodynamic therapy is big. There's a reason why humanistic therapy is big. It's because these theories have been put to the test over time. And if people were too closed-minded and afraid to have these theories scrutinized, then they would not be as big as they are, because then we would not collect the data to show that they actually work, right? So think about it from that angle. And now I will move on to point number 9. Therapeutic narcissism can show up in therapy when therapists start to believe that they have some sort of shamanistic function. So what is a shaman? A shaman is like a spiritual leader, a guide of some sort, someone who has the ability to talk to the gods and intercede for their people and help them on the journey and be the one to show them the light, etc., because they are chosen, and they are the people that they are the chosen people that can show people the way. So when you're a therapist and you start to believe that you are special and you are chosen and your work is very wow, I don't know what the word is, but it's just where you are really doing, oh my gosh, the work of the Lord, and you believe that your role is very special and it's very unique, and you have this duty to show people the way and to open them up to the world and just make their life perfect, etc., then you start becoming therapeutically narcissistic. In reality, you are, again, I will keep saying this, and I'm not saying this lightly, I'm just saying it because it's the truth. Don't overestimate your position in your clients' lives. You are not the most important person in your client's life. You are not, you will never be. Always remember that the client has other people in their life who are very, very important, who are very, very powerful, and they have been present in the client's life for way longer than you, and they will be there even after you are gone. So don't believe that you hold this very, very special position in your client's life. You are a part of your client's life, and only for a season. If anything, as we say, therapists, you should be trying to make yourself redundant. Good therapy is when a therapist is trying to make themselves redundant. It's when you're trying to put yourself out of business. That is when you know you're practicing good therapy. You're not supposed to have your clients in therapy for the rest of their lives. Because, again, as I am saying, clients have a whole life that has existed before you. They have been making decisions without you. They have lived a whole life without you. They didn't even know you 2 weeks ago. They just met you. And the moment you start thinking that you are the most important person in their life, then really you're going out of the way. You are lost, and you're losing them as well. You do not have a special purpose in this world to come and rescue clients. It is not your role to save them. It is not your role to give them advice that will change their life. That is not why they pay you. Your clients pay you because they need support in the season of life they are in. You have been equipped with techniques and skills to help people navigate difficult seasons of their life. And by difficult, I don't mean that the client is completely in the pits. Sometimes it's just a season of life that requires support. That does not mean that the client has to be incapacitated fully, they are completely depressed, etc. That's not what I mean. You are there to serve a purpose, and when your purpose is done, then you exit the stage. Do not get too comfortable with the position you hold in your client's life. Do not overestimate your importance in the client's life. Remember that the client has other important people in their life. And actually, if you are trying to be a good therapist, you should be working hand in hand with the client to build their social support outside of the therapy session. You don't want to become your client's only source of support. That is a problematic place to be in. That's a problematic position to hold. You want your client to have a whole social life that happens and exists outside of you and outside of the therapy session. So think about it that way. You are not a god, and you are not here on a special mission to rescue your clients and to save them from whatever you think you're trying to rescue them or save them from. And if you're a client, you're listening to this, don't go to your therapist expecting them to save you. And I think this is a point that I spoke about deeply in probably my last episode, where I spoke about why therapy doesn't work. And one of the reasons was because we think that therapists are there to save us. Again, therapeutic narcissism. Let that word sink into your psyche. Number 10. Let's talk about number 10. When we start to believe that whatever therapy we practice is the only true religion, then we have for sure developed a serious case of therapeutic narcissism. As I have said, I think this is a point that is basically a repetition of others and a reiteration of everything I have said so far. The therapy you practice is not superior, it's not better, it's just different. And anyway, it has served you, or it has served you, some of your clients. It does not mean that it will serve all your clients, and it is not the only thing that can help your clients. Always remember that therapy is just one piece of the puzzle. There are many other things that clients use to deal with their problems beyond therapy. One thing that my supervisor told me when I was in school was, your clients have tried to address their problems with many things. They have tried to address their problems in many ways, and some of those ways have failed. Maybe they have failed in such a significant way that the client is realizing, I need external support to deal with this thing. So whatever I have been doing is not working. Let me get somebody to help me in a different way. That means therapy is not the only way to address people's problems. There are other ways that people can address their problems. And those ways are working for some people, they're not working for others. And your clients will attempt any number of ways to deal with their problem. Even when they're in therapy, even before they come to therapy, they will attempt other things. So don't be caught up thinking that if they don't come to therapy, oh my gosh, they will never get over what they're dealing with. If they don't come to therapy, they will never heal from their trauma. If they don't come to therapy, they will never get to live a full life. That is not true. Some people do live a very good life without ever stepping foot in therapy. Some people do overcome their trauma without ever stepping foot in therapy. Some people do eventually build a meaningful life in other ways without ever using therapy as a tool. So therapy is not everything, and it's not the only thing. And your clients are allowed to have other things that they use to help themselves deal with their problems. And that is okay, and it is allowed. So again, don't become too dogmatic about therapy. Don't become too dogmatic about the therapy that you practice. It's not the only thing in the world. Clients have other things. And I encourage clients to have many places where they get support beyond therapy. Number 11, therapeutic narcissism can show up when therapists start to believe that technical approaches are to be avoided in favor of the intrinsic beauty of purely theoretical models. Let me explain. Therapeutic approaches, as I've said, are many. We have very many schools of thoughts about what causes psychopathology, about what causes suffering, about what causes pain in people's lives. And as I have said, each of these theories has its merits. Technical approaches are, for example, CBT, DBT, ACT, EMDR, these therapies that are very structured. These therapies follow a particular system. Intrinsic models are something like psychodynamic therapy. Psychodynamic therapy does not have a script. You sit with the client and meet them where they are, and you talk about things and you follow where they go. Most of the time, it's not going to be directive. It's not going to be, let's talk about this, or let's talk about this other thing, or we have to do this and we have to do this. It doesn't work like that. Psychodynamic therapy is very much a model where you go with the client on a journey. It's not necessarily a place where you go and create structure and there's this thing that you're going to do, etc., etc. So there are people who believe that these technical approaches like CBT are to be avoided because they are too structured, and you're supposed to just use the intrinsic ones, the psychodynamics, the psychoanalysis, the ones that are very, that you're listening to your heart. There's no structure. Nobody's telling you you should do this or you should do this other thing. It's very instinctual. You're just going with the client and going with the flow. The assumption is usually that these models that are not structured like CBT, the ones that don't have a specific manual that you're following, the assumption is usually that those models are easier to do, that those models are less effective. The assumption is that they are the ones that you do because, especially when you don't know the structured ones, many therapists will approach them thinking that if I do these feelings theories. I'm calling them feelings theories because that is the assumption that they are fickle and they are not based on anything. You're just going with the flow. It's just something that you think about. It's very, I don't know. I don't even know how to, it's very fluid. I don't know how to explain it, but I hope you're getting what I'm saying. So that is usually the assumption, that they are not based on structure. But in reality, psychodynamic therapy is very difficult to do. Psychodynamic therapy it requires structure. It's only that structure is not manualized like in CBT. And that does not mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that it exists in the therapist's ability to perform it. So psychodynamic therapy is difficult. Other theoretical models, purely theoretical models, are also quite difficult. It requires, you take years to learn how to perform them. It takes years to learn how to do them, how to do those kinds of therapeutic approaches. And technical approaches are not superior or inferior to these other kinds of therapies. As I have said, and I will keep saying this again, over and over again, no theory, no therapeutic model, no modality is superior to another. If anything, common factors is the one that is superior to all of them. Because common factors goes and explores all the theories and sees what makes them work and then puts them together into one model. And we understand that common factors are superior to any individual therapy model that you practice. I think this is where we say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that is a way to think about these theories that we practice as therapists, and even the theory that your therapist is practicing with you. So yeah, think about it that way. Last, but definitely not least, therapeutic narcissism can show up when we believe that long-term therapy is the only real type of therapy. One thing about therapy is that some people practice long-term therapy, and long-term therapy can be anything beyond a year, and others practice very short-term therapy. They're like 12 weeks, you're good, go away, move on, you know. And of course, they don't say it in those words. They won't kick you out per se. But in reality, there are people who practice long-term therapy. There are people who practice short-term therapy. There are people like me who practice both, depending on the client, depending on the issue, etc., etc. As a therapist, when you become committed to believing that only long-term therapy is the only real type of therapy, then you can get trapped in therapeutic narcissism. This is going to be the song of this episode. If you don't walk away with anything else from this episode, just remember, therapeutic narcissism. That is the word you need to take away with you. Long-term therapy, again, is not the only real type of therapy. Short-term therapy works. It works for different people. It works for different issues. I mean, there's short-term therapy as short as one session, and it's something that I practice. I practice single-session therapy. I offer that to clients all the time. It's not for everyone. It's not for everything. It doesn't work all the time, and it doesn't work for everything. And that is the reality we have to live with. And that is not a bad thing. Some clients don't need 12 sessions. Some clients don't need one whole year. Some clients don't need 5 years of therapy. But then there are people who need that much. If you're dealing with issues like borderline personality disorder, you're dealing with bipolar, you're dealing with narcissistic personality disorder, these are things that will take years to deal with. If you're dealing with attachment issues, if you're dealing with relational patterns and you're trying to heal childhood trauma, these are things that will take a very, very long time. They have been present for a very long time. They are not going to go away because you've done 12 sessions of CBT or any other short-term therapy that you can think of. So long-term therapy is not the only real therapy. And short-term therapy is not the only real therapy. Real therapy is the therapy that you use for the client depending on the issue they have, depending on how much time and effort and money they are willing to put into the process, depending on how much training and clinical expertise you have in the specific therapy you're practicing. Not everyone is skilled enough to do long-term therapy. Not everyone is skilled enough to do short-term therapy. Not everyone is skilled enough to deal with every type of disorder out there. All of us have to kind of narrow our focus and work on specific issues because you can't help everyone. You are not trained to help everyone, and therapy does not work for everyone. I know I have said a lot about a lot. I have spoken a lot of things about therapeutic narcissism, and I want to read a final quote that says, "Therapeutic narcissism is at the heart of so much bad therapy. It is overconfidence, arrogance, and thinking that we know what is best for others that gets us in trouble more often than not." If you're a therapist out there, you're practicing, or if you have been to therapy, you have seen a therapist and you have experienced bad therapy, I promise you, in one way or another, it was because of one of the 12 issues that I've just mentioned related to therapeutic narcissism. When people become overconfident, when people become arrogant, when people become dogmatic about the therapies that they practice, then things become very problematic for the clients. So as an individual, if you're listening to this, please talk to your therapist and see if this is something they are familiar with, or start having a conversation about what your therapist believes therapy is. Are they the person that believes that long-term therapy is the only real therapy? Are they someone who believes that short-term therapy is the only real therapy? Are they a person who believes that they are smarter or more skilled than they really are? Do they believe that their personality is the only thing that is important in therapy beyond having skills and techniques and being grounded in a strong theoretical background, These are conversations to have with your therapist, with your therapist friends, with your colleagues if you are a therapist. These are conversations to have with yourself. It's a checklist of some sort to think about when you are thinking about the kind of work that you do if you're a therapist. And I think that's all I have to say about therapeutic narcissism. I have to mention, though, that this particular topic, this particular episode is inspired by Arthur Freeman. Arthur Freeman is a psychologist who practices CBT in marriage and family therapy, and he has written so many books. And I came across him when I was reading a book called Bad Therapy, and it's about master therapists sharing their worst failures in therapy. So Arthur Freeman wrote about these 12 signifiers or manifestations of therapeutic narcissism, and I was very inspired to speak about them because I was like, yeah, everybody needs to know about this. Everybody needs to be aware of what bad therapy looks like, and I am happy to be the one to have presented this to you. I hope you found this beneficial. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have something to say about this episode, if you have a contradicting point of view, if you want to fight me, please do so in the comment section. I really, really love seeing your comments, and I read all of them. I respond to all of them, and I can't wait to interact with you about this topic and any other topic. If you have any questions that you want me to address in this podcast in the future, please share them either in the comment section or on my email address, which you can find in the description box. And I guess I will see you in the next episode. Take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, go forth and thrive. And bye.